Over the top? No, we had no over the top rules. We were totally reasonable, thoughtful parents who made solid decisions at every turn.
You know Ron Howard as the guy who directed some of your favorite movies. The innocent kid from The Andy Griffith Show, America's favorite director. But what if I told you that behind that friendly smile, there's a story filled with pain, danger, and secrets that would shock you? For over 50 years, Ron Howard stayed quiet about the dark reality of Hollywood. But now, everything is coming to light. From nearly drowning as a child to receiving death threats, from watching actors get burned on his sets to losing millions because of his principles, Ron Howard's journey is nothing like what you imagined. This is the truth he's finally sharing, and honestly, it's heartbreaking. Let's go back to where it all started. Ron Howard was born on March 1st, 1954, in a tiny town in Oklahoma. His parents were struggling actors who barely had enough money to survive. When Ron was only 4 years old, his mom and dad packed up everything they owned and moved to Hollywood. They were chasing a dream, hoping to make it big in the film industry. But life wasn't easy. They ended up living in a small house in Burbank, barely making ends meet. Little Ron grew up watching movie sets and actors every single day because they lived so close to a major studio. He didn't have a normal childhood. Instead of going to regular preschool like other kids, he was being taught right there on film sets. Here's something wild. When Ron was just 18 months old, he appeared in his very first movie. It wasn't some big plan. His dad needed a baby for one quick scene and just used his own son. That tiny moment of a baby crawling on a film set was the beginning of something huge. But even as Ron started getting more roles, his parents made a tough decision. They refused to let him sign any long-term acting contracts until he turned 5 years old. They wanted to protect him from the harsh treatment that other child stars were going through. This decision almost destroyed them financially. In 1957, they were so broke that Ron's dad seriously considered quitting acting altogether and moving back to Oklahoma to become a farmer. They were pawning their belongings just to pay rent. But somehow, they held on. When Ron finally turned 5 in 1959, things slowly started to change. He got cast in a movie called The Journey, and for the first time, his name actually appeared in the credits. But it wasn't all happy. On that movie set, crew members made fun of him. They called him names like freckle-faced freak because of his red hair and freckles. Can you imagine being a little kid and hearing adults mock you like that? It broke his heart. His dad got into an argument with one of the crew members who was bullying Ron and almost lost his job because of it. That job only paid $12,500, but for their family, it meant everything. Then, in 1960, something massive happened. 6-year-old Ron landed the role of Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. More than 300 kids auditioned for that part, but Ron's natural charm won everyone over. The show became a huge hit and ran for 8 years with 249 episodes. Ron was in almost all of them. At first, he was paid $300 per episode. By the time the show ended in 1968, he was making $1,000 an episode. That might sound like a lot, but remember, he was still just a child carrying the weight of memorizing lines, showing up on time every single day, and performing perfectly. There was no live audience, so every joke had to be delivered with exact timing. The pressure was real. Ron became very close with Andy Griffith, the star of the show. Andy acted like a mentor and father figure. He would explain scenes to Ron and tell him stories between takes, but things weren't always peaceful. Andy struggled with alcohol, and sometimes young Ron would see him get angry and have arguments on set. It was scary for a kid to witness. Despite this, Andy was still kind to Ron and helped him through difficult emotional scenes. Years later, they discovered something amazing. After Andy passed away in 2012, the family found out that Ron and Andy were actually distant cousins. Their special bond suddenly made even more sense. Now here's where things get really dark. In 1962, 8-year-old Ron nearly drowned while filming. They were shooting a fishing scene on a small boat when something went terribly wrong. The boat tipped over and Ron fell into the cold water. Andy Griffith saw it happening and didn't hesitate for even a second. He jumped right in and pulled Ron out of the water, saving his life. The producers didn't want anyone to know about this accident because they were afraid it would damage the show's reputation, so they kept it completely quiet. But Ron never forgot that moment. Back in those days, there were no real safety rules for child actors. Kids could work incredibly long hours, and accidents like this weren't uncommon. That near-drowning experience left a permanent mark on Ron's memory. Years later, when he started directing his own films, he made absolutely sure that every single set had proper safety plans in place. When The Andy Griffith Show finally ended in 1968, Ron was 14 years old. You'd think he would get tons of new acting roles, right? Wrong. Instead, he got rejected over and over again. He went to more than 50 auditions in 1968 and 69, and nothing worked. Out. Everyone in Hollywood still saw him as Little Opie, the innocent kid from that wholesome TV show. He felt completely trapped. He told his parents he wanted to quit acting altogether. He had to take small roles that paid way less than what he used to earn. All of this rejection gave him serious anxiety, but he tried to hide it from everyone around him. Then in 1973, something happened that Ron would later call one of the most painful experiences of his life. He was 19 years old and got cast in a movie called American Graffiti, directed by George Lucas. On the outside, it looked like an exciting opportunity. But behind the scenes, things got really ugly. Two of his co-stars, Harrison Ford and Paul Le Mat, bullied him relentlessly. On July 15th, they threw beer bottles near his car and yelled at him to dance, calling him Opie in a mocking way. 5 days later, they locked him inside a trailer, making him miss important rehearsals. They even spiked his drinks. All of this happened because Ron had been a famous child star, and they didn't respect that. Ron stayed quiet and just took it. He later called this his only moment of Opie shaming. Years later, Harrison Ford actually apologized for what he did. But the pain and humiliation stuck with Ron for a very long time. During this difficult period, Ron had something good in his life. He had met a girl named Cheryl Alley back in high school in 1970. Their first date was on November 1st, and they went to see a movie and had pizza. It was simple and sweet. But then in December, a horrible rumor started spreading around school that Cheryl was pregnant. They were both just 16 years old. The gossip exploded everywhere. In January 1971, Ron had to deny it in the school newspaper. But then tabloids picked up the story in February. Because of these false rumors, Ron lost a TV guest role that would have paid him $2,000. Cheryl was devastated by all the lies. But despite everything, they stayed together. Ron proposed to her 3 different times before she finally said yes in October 1974. They got married on June 7, 1975, and they've now been together for 50 years. Ron often calls Cheryl his good luck charm. Money problems continued to haunt Ron even after the Andy Griffith Show ended. In January 1971, he started delivering newspapers just to make some extra cash. He earned $150 a month and had to deliver 200 papers every single morning before school started. He needed that money to take Cheryl out on dates. But then on April 5th, while driving to an audition, he got rear-ended by a truck. He suffered whiplash and had to delay his next acting role. The medical bills added up to $3,000, and he didn't have any insurance. He was so desperate that he even sold his bicycle for $200. The pain from that accident stayed with him for years and actually affected how he moved during later film scenes. Even after American Graffiti became a massive hit in 1973, making $115 million, Ron didn't get what he deserved. The movie was made on a tiny budget of $777,000, but became hugely successful. Ron only got a flat payment of $10,000 with no share of the profits at all. He asked George Lucas for just 1% of the profits, which would have been worth over $1 million. Lucas said no. This really hurt their friendship. Ron had to take a job on a new TV show called Happy Days in 1974 just to have steady income. He was paid $1,000 per episode. Happy Days became another massive hit, and by 1976, the show was reaching 31 million viewers every single week. But there was a big problem. Fonzie, played by Henry Winkler, became the breakout snaze. RT, the network executives wanted to rename the entire show to Fonzie's Happy Days. Ron wasn't okay with this at all. He had been the star since the very beginning, and now he was being pushed aside. In November 1976, Ron gave the producers an ultimatum. If they changed the title, he would quit, even though his contract lasted until 1980. Everything nearly fell apart. But then the news leaked to the press, and fans were furious. More than 10,000 letters poured into the network from angry viewers who didn't want Ron to leave. The network gave in and kept the original title. But something had changed forever. By 1977, the show was making $50 million a year, yet Ron was earning only $25,000 per episode while Henry Winkler was making $75,000. This inequality pushed Ron to think seriously about directing instead of just acting. Things on set weren't peaceful either. Cast members started fighting over money and screen time. There were rumors of physical fights, though nothing was ever fully proven. The network tried to keep everything quiet to protect their money-making machine. Years later, in 2012, some cast members even sued for $10 million in unpaid royalties from merchandise. Just in 1976 alone, over 5 million Happy Days lunchboxes were sold. The case settled, and each cast member received only $65,000, while the studios had made millions. While still acting on Happy Days, Ron quietly directed his first short film in early 1975. He shot it during a 2-week break using only $2,000 of his own money. This little project gave him confidence and pushed him to direct his first real movie, called Grand Theft Auto in 1977. That movie cost only $600,000 to make, but earned $15 million. This was Ron's entry into the directing world. By July 1980, Ron made a bold and risky move. He left Happy Days. The show still had 20 million weekly viewers, but Ron wanted more creative freedom. He asked the network if he could direct TV movies, and they refused. They offered him $100,000 to stay for 3 more years. He said no, and signed with a different network for $1 million. Fans were shocked and heartbroken. 15,000 letters flooded in begging him to return. But Ron had made his decision. The show continued without him until 1984, but the ratings dropped by 30%. Ron never looked back. His directing career took off. In 1984, he directed Splash, which made Tom Hanks a star, and earned almost $70 million. But behind the scenes, Tom Hanks had tantrums over script changes. There was even a screaming match with the crew that Ron had to break up. In 1985, while filming Cocoon, Ron received an actual death threat from an angry extra who had been fired. The man sent threatening letters, and the studio had to hire 24-hour security that cost $150,000. The movie still made $85 million and won Oscars. In 1991, while directing Backdraft, a terrible accident happened. A massive fire broke out during a stunt scene. Actor Kurt Russell got burned on his hand and face. 3 other crew members were also burned. An investigation found serious safety violations. Ron later admitted they never knew when the fire stunts would become dangerous. The movie made $152 million, but the guilt from those injuries stayed with him. In 1995, Apollo 13 became one of Ron's biggest successes, making $355 million worldwide. but filming was incredibly rough. Tom Hanks demanded absolute accuracy and insisted on script rewrites. At one point in October 1994, the entire production shut down for several days, costing $2 million. Ron actually threatened to quit. NASA staff had to step in and mediate the conflict. The film went on to win Oscars for editing and sound. Then in 1996, while filming Ransom, something truly terrifying happened. Ron started receiving chilling threats that mirrored the kidnapping plot of the movie. On Valentine's Day, someone sent letters threatening his children. This wasn't a joke. The FBI got involved, tapped his phones, and found suspicious cars near his house. Ron had to relocate his entire family to a safe location on March 5th. No arrests were ever made, but the suspects fled California. Ron later said this experience made Ransom his most personal and emotional work. In 2000, The Grinch starring Jim Carrey made $345 million. But filming was absolutely brutal. Jim Carrey had to sit through 2.5 hours of makeup application every single day. On March 22nd, he completely snapped. He got into a physical fight with Ron and even shoved him. Production stopped for an entire day, but Jim promised to behave better, and they finished the film. It won an Oscar for makeup. In 2001, Ron directed A Beautiful Mind, which told the story of mathematician John Nash and his battle with mental illness. The movie made $313 million and won Best Picture and Best Director at the Oscars. But the set was incredibly tense. Russell Crowe had violent outbursts. He once threw a phone at a hotel clerk. On April 15th, Ron actually fired Russell from the film. But just 2 days later, he had to hire him back to avoid losing $500,000 per day in production costs. The actress Jennifer Connelly later said that Ron held everything together through absolute chaos. In 2006, the Da Vinci Code caused a worldwide uproar. Religious groups, especially the Catholic Church, were furious because the story suggested controversial ideas about Jesus. Ron received death threats and had to hire bodyguards. There was even a bomb scare at a film premiere. Critics booed during screenings. The U.S. Catholic bishops launched an entire website to counter the movie. The Vatican called it anti-Catholic. But despite all the controversy, the movie made $760 million worldwide. Ron later admitted the constant anger and protests felt incredibly frustrating. In 2017, Ron was brought in to save the Star Wars movie Solo after the original directors were fired. He had to reshoot 70% of the film in just a few months to meet the deadline. This pushed the budget to $275 million. Fans were divided. Some blamed Ron for playing it too safe and removing the fun, risky style. The film earned $393 million, which sounds like a lot, but it was far below expectations for a Star Wars movie. Ron faced criticism from all sides. In 2015, Ron's company got hit with a serious lawsuit. 54 Sudanese refugees claimed their real-life pain and stories were used in the film The Good Lie without fair payment. They said they shared heartbreaking stories of starvation and escaping violence in exchange for $55,000 and a promise of help, but they never received the money. The case settled secretly in 2017. Ron wasn't personally named in the lawsuit, but the backlash was strong and painful. During the filming of Rush in 2013, another terrible accident occurred. A stunt driver got seriously hurt when a car suspension failed during a fiery crash scene. The driver sued, saying safety was ignored. Things got even worse when the son of the film's stunt coordinator died in a car crash just 18 days after the movie was released. Ron got subpoenaed and faced tough questions about whether corners were cut to save money. In 2020, Ron directed Hillbilly Elegy for Netflix. The movie was based on J.D. Vance's memoir. In August 2025, Ron told reporters he was completely shocked when Vance became Donald Trump's running mate in 2024. Ron said that when they filmed in 2018 and 2019, Vance seemed moderate and reasonable. Back in 2016, Vance had even called Trump reprehensible. Ron admitted he sent Vance a cold text in November 2024, congratulating him, but also saying he was disappointed in how Vance's values seemed to have changed. Ron called the whole situation a mixed bag. Throughout his career, Ron has faced death threats, lawsuits, accidents where people got hurt, religious protests, family pressures, and constant criticism. His daughter Bryce Dallas Howard has openly talked about being a Nepo baby, acknowledging that doors opened easily for her because of her famous dad. Ron's father Rance passed away in 2017, and there were whispers about family conflicts, though nothing was ever proven. In 2025, Ron celebrated 50 years of marriage with Cheryl. They raised 4 kids and now have 6 grandchildren. Despite all the pain, all the accidents, all the threats and controversies, Ron and Cheryl have stayed together through it all. Ron says there was never anyone else for him. So what's the truth about Ron Howard? He's not just America's favorite director with a perfect life. He's someone who nearly drowned as a child, who got bullied by his co-stars, who watched people get hurt on his sets, who received death threats multiple times, who lost millions because of his principles, and who carried guilt and pain for decades. He's finally breaking his silence about all of it. And honestly, it's not the happy Hollywood story we thought we knew. If this story shocked you, hit that like button right now. Share this video with anyone who loves movies or thinks Hollywood is all glamour and fun. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel because we're bringing you more untold stories that will blow your mind. Drop a comment below and tell me what surprised you most about Ron Howard's journey. I'll see you in the next video.